What are some very creepy facts? The Colombian serial killer Pedro Alonso Lopez, who is known as the Monster of the Andes, raped and murdered over 300 girls from Ecuador, Peru and Colombia. However, after he was caught and imprisoned for 18 years, he was put in a psychiatric hospital. There he was reviewed, declared to be sane, and was set free, in spite of his blatant avowal that he fully intends to kill again. Since he was released in 1998, nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. He is supposed to be 71 years old at present. He is known for being the most prolific killer ever. There is a genetic disease called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. When tissue is damaged, it is replaced with bone. Growths form underneath their skin and their joints lock solid, so over time those affected slowly become encased in a prison of bone just beneath their own skin. They usually have to choose between sitting or standing up for the rest of their life. By the end of their life they have to drink every meal through a straw and can barely move. And removing the excess bone with surgery is no option either, because the injuries from the surgery will create even more bone. If you get a blood transfusion and get the wrong type of blood, A, B, O, AB, one of the symptoms is a sense of impending doom. Lobsters don't age. Their cells don't decompose. They grow so big that they spend more energy to shed than they can reserve and die of exhaustion. Over 90% of serial killers choose their victims through sexual desire. In fact, many serial killers have been caught because they return to the body of their victims to masturbate. Humans' eyes don't reflect light at night like animals do. I like to say this fact to my wife at a campfire. Your eyes have a separate immune system from the rest of your body. If they get damaged in such a way that it affects anything other than your eyes, your regular immune system can attack the damage and will not recognize them, meaning your own body can permanently blind you. What's worse, your body cannot tell the difference between either eye. If one of them gets infected or damaged, your immune system can attack your healthy eye and take away your sight entirely. Mom, come pick up, I'm scared. Bacteria and viruses can be frozen for millions of years and still be viably infectious, and having never encountered humanity before, could have no end of catastrophic results should they be uncovered and manage to infect a person or animal. Not to worry though, it's not like millions of ancient pathogens are currently trapped in permafrost, which is now melting bit by bit each and every day. Rosemary Kennedy was JFK's sister. She suffered from oxygen deprivation at birth and that unfortunately stunted her mental growth. She had a pretty decent childhood, but as she grew older she began to act out, afraid that her behavior would risk his political career. Her father, Joseph, agreed to have her lobotomized. Her mother, Rose, was against it and forbade him from doing it, so he did it behind her back when she went on a trip. After the operation, Rosemary's already low IQ was lowered even further, to the point she could no longer walk or communicate. Her family had her locked up in an institution and basically disowned her. They never visited and never publicly acknowledged her anymore. Rosemary died at the age of 86. Her mother never forgave her husband for what he had done. It's unknown if she had that low of an IQ, though she did have some brain damage at birth. She was functional enough to read and write, and part of the reason she was lobotomized may have involved sleeping around and being defiant. She had an active social life. Imagine being lobotomized because the general standard of the family was people like JFK and RFK, and you weren't living up to it. Remember that bath salts cannibal guy from a couple years back? He wasn't high on bath salts when he did that. That was just media speculation and bullshit. They only found pot in his system during the autopsy. We still have no idea why he flipped out. The Chankiri tree is a tree in the Cambodian killing fields against which babies and small children were bashed after their parents had been killed. The men of the ship Essex, the true event that inspires the story Moby Dick, avoided islands after being shipwrecked for fear of cannibals. The islands were settled, and landing there would have brought salvation to the survivors. Ironically, because of this bypass, the men ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. You know what's even creepier? 2 of the sailors were later rescued by an American ship. They were alone at sea for so long and had to cannibalize their crewmates to survive. When they saw their rescuers, they immediately stashed bones in their pockets. They didn't seem to care that they were rescued. They were obsessed with the bones of their fallen crewmates, so they can suck on the bone marrows. Even after they were on board the ship, they refused to depart from the bones and would even attack anyone who would come close. Cannibals find the palm of the hand the tastiest. Jokes on them. I had my dick in my hand before. After raping his blindfolded victims, the Golden State Killer would be super duper quiet and pretend like he was gone. And right when the poor victims would start to move towards the phone or try to untie themselves, he would scare the ducking shit out of them. One reason that crows and ravens are associated with death is because they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching on one direction meant that there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterwards. Crocodiles can gallop like a horse. I don't like knowing this, so I'm cursing you people with this knowledge as well. Fortunately, alligators cannot. So that's how you tell them apart. Imagine being totally aware of someone performing CPR, but you physically can't move or respond. Well, that's what happens when you get bitten by a blue-ringed octopus. You have approximate 6 minutes between being bitten and someone starting CPR to keep your heart and lungs functioning to ensure you survive, all whilst being totally aware of what is happening to you. Neurotoxins are fun. The really creepy thing about this is one story of a guy who got stung, got CPR performed on him and survived, but went blind because he was lying on his back, eyes open, unable to blink because of the paralysis, staring into the sun. Imagine lying there, unable to move, unable to communicate, the sun slowly burning out your eyes and you can't shut them. The US has lost 6 nuclear warheads in total. Your brain can play tricks on you to make you see monsters in the mirror, called the Traxler effect. The Traxler effect is an optical illusion that affects how you perceive things, both visually and mentally. I once read that you should play dead if a bear attacks you, unless they start licking your wounds, because that means they plan to eat you. That still haunts me to this day. Edit. If it helps, I'm pretty sure I was reading about grizzly bears at the time during one of my fevered grizzly man rabbit holes. The astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger most likely didn't die until they hit the water miles below the initial explosion. There's a spider that gives you a 3H long boner before you die from its bite. Edit. The boner it gives you is very painful. Die hard. If the sun exploded right now, you would be blissfully unaware of it for just over 8 minutes, while the energy travels at the speed of light to get to you. The human body can be drained of blood in 6 seconds given adequate vacuuming systems. Not everyone can afford a Dyson. Most people smell different when they're awake. Since 1900, over 13,000 people have been murdered by serial killers in the USA. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers. There are upwards of 300 active serial killers in the world. Seems low, honestly. 300 is a lot, but out of 8 billion. Famous last words though. A single tiger has killed over 436 people in India. How many has a married tiger killed? Sense of impending doom is an actual symptom that often precedes your death, usually in cases of heart attack. Very creepy for some of us that suffer from anxiety and panic attacks to begin with. Both share that symptom. Edit. As many of you are pointing out. Yes, I used precluding correctly. ///. There's a parasite that enters a fish's mouth, eats the tongue, and replaces itself as the fish's new tongue. As a fish, There isn't a cure and it sucks. I keep saying stuff I don't mean to say. Hearing is the last thing to go after you die. You just might hear the paramedics and firefighters call off CPR. According to Abe Lincoln's bodyguard Crook, he said Lincoln had a dream about his own assassination 3 nights in a row before he was killed. Crook told Lincoln not to go on that fateful night, and all Lincoln said was goodbye. Crook before he went to the play. This was very odd as Lincoln always said, good night not goodbye. Mount Everest is covered in frozen corpses because removing them is very unsafe and time consuming. They are easily viewed from the climbing routes and some are used as trail markers. After getting stung by a cone snail, you don't feel the sting for a little bit. There is no antivenom, and it can be lethal. Treatment is basically keeping the victim alive until the venom wears off. Cone snails are pretty freaky. Some of the most deadly ones can kill you in 30 minutes or less after they sting you. Their shells are super pretty too, so any beachcomber should be aware of these creatures and know how to pick up a shell carefully just in case someone might still be inside. CNN has had a pre-recorded broadcast from the 90s which they will premiere during the end of the world. People don't take their anti-malarial drugs when they travel because they hear bad stories about the side effects and they see native people in the areas living okay without taking pills every day. The truth is, populations native to malaria endemic areas have all passed through pretty intense natural selection for survival and have a host of genes that prevent them from dying or suffering the other worst effects. Also, most of the resistance is built up over time. This is why it's most common for children to die rather than adults. Whatever people have heard about the side effects of the antimalarials, getting it is so much worse. I, fortunately, have never had it, but I study it as part of my work and people have told me about having it, and they all say the same thing. It is so awful you can't believe you're even still alive. It comes in cycles, usually 48 hours, and each cycle is agonizing and brings you the brink of death. Sometimes it takes you. Sometimes it spares you for another few hours until it starts again. And there are forms that, even if you clear the infection with drugs, it still remains dormant in your system and can come back at any time. Edit. I don't want to freak people out too much. There are drug combinations that can kill every stage of the parasite as long as there is no drug resistance. The stonerfish, an incredibly venomous fish living in tropical waters mostly off the coast of Australia and parts of US, can cause pain that only escalates with time. Eventually the pain will subside, but even after the barb is removed, patients have reported increasing pain 12+ hours later. Without antivenom or denaturing the venom with excessive heat, the pain builds and builds until the patients request euthanasia. Its spines hold the venom, hidden in its dorsal fins. Aboriginals living around the Great Barrier Reef have corroborees, large gatherings, and will during these gatherings hold reenactments of people being stung by this monster, for what I assume is either amusement, learning, or both. Edit. Corroboree clarification. Edit 2. Pain does eventually end. Reminded of Suicide Tree, where pain does not. Terrible leaves for toilet paper. Thank you for all the upvotes. So glad one of my parents' horror stories from Australia is so well received. Pigs will eat anything. There are stories of pigs entering farmhouses and eating newborn humans. A black mamba is the fastest snake which can slither at a speed of 5 miles an hour, 20 km/h. They have neurotoxins which are fast acting. The venom shuts down the nervous system and paralyzes the victim. Its venom is able to kill 10 people and it repeatedly bites. To add on to this, there is an almost 100% kill rate and can kill in 20 minutes. Men who are hanged get a death erection, known as rigor erectus. Pretty awkward for the family, I assume. Serial killer Richard Chase took any unlocked door as an invitation to come inside. If you begin to display symptoms of rabies you will go crazy and die. There's no cure. Your brain will slowly melt until you're dead. The second you get bitten by anything you should literally speed to the hospital. They used real corpses in the 1982 film Poltergeist for the ending pool scene. The actress did not know until after the scene was filmed. Cockroaches have been recorded eating human flesh, both living and dead, as well as fingernails, eyelashes, feet, and hands. The American cockroach and German cockroach are more likely to bite humans than other species. Pretty sure Australian cockroaches do something equally creepy. But as an Australian who plans to sleep at some point in the future, I'm not going to Google it. Blobfish in its natural habitat looks like a normal fish, but it lives so deep underwater that it doesn't use a normal gas bladder to keep itself balanced. Instead, it has a spongy skin that is slightly less dense than water, which becomes damaged and bloated when fishermen bring it up too quickly. It's not really the ugliest fish. It has just experienced something worse than one of us being thrown into outer space. Between sea level and space, there's 1 atmospheric pressure of difference. Between sea level and 2,000 feet underwater, their upper limit, there's 60 atmospheres of difference. It was once discovered that a fir tree was growing inside a human body. Artyom Sidorkin went to the doctor suspecting something wrong with his lungs. The doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but turns out he had inhaled a fir tree seed which had sprouted and had begun growing in his lungs. Edit. Wow, so Grey's Anatomy is a popular show. I'm sure this was the inspiration for that episode. Ducks become cannibals due to /zero boredom. Of all ducking reasons, they can only be stopped by cutting off their mouths. If you live to age 70 you will have shed around 105 pounds of skin. Edit. Because most seem confused. I mean over time, not all at once, that would be terrible. There was a speech made for Apollo 11 if they were to die on the moon. Side fact, if it were to happen, people would look up at the moon knowing that crew died there, and their bodies would rest there till the end of time. Not forgetting that the ocean is somewhat like this. Many people died there too, at the very depths of the sea. Dolphins are ducking monsters, and although this one isn't as creepy as other comments, but gangs of male dolphins can trap a female, slap her around with their tails, and forcibly duck her for weeks. Dolphins are ducked up, man. Tarantulas can swim. John Harvey Kellogg was a prude, so he and his brother invented cornflakes and recommend cutting your foreskin to stop males from wanking. For females, he suggested rubbing carbolic acid on the clitoris, but fortunately that didn't catch on in the West. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.